So, welcome to the Slice of Time Street Photography podcast. Today I'm joined by Darren Lehane. I'm gonna pronounce. I just asked him how to pronounce it, and I still butcher it. A street photographer from Bristol, but originally from London, I understood, both in the UK. And his work stood out to me a lot because, well, his photos are just hilarious, and I think that's something missing in a lot of street photography these days. So, Darren, could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, you did very well with the surname. So it's Darren Lehane, or as I said, maybe in Ireland they would say Lehane, and I'd get told off for saying Lehane. So yeah, I'm a street photographer. I'm near Bristol. I'm actually in a seaside town about 20 miles down the coast called Weston-super-Mare, and I've been here almost 5 years now. But yeah, as you say, originally from London. And I'm into this year's actually my 20th year of shooting street photography.
Yeah, that's immediately something I wanted to pick up on. 20 years, you mean? You say, or I thought it was 22 years, maybe. But um, anyway, like 20 or 22 years, like how did you see street photography evolve in that time?
Wow. Yeah, I think it's most probably as it's become ever more popular, it's evolved even more. I think technology has changed it an awful lot. Smartphones and how people would use smartphones. I mean, I'd like to think that I still stick to what I would call traditional street photography. So the photography that, sort of grew out the 50s, 60s, 70s, with people like Gary Winogrand. One of the things I always say, and I find, kind of with new street photographers, is much more of a tendency to shoot photos in the vertical portrait mode. And I think that's because of using smartphones. They're so used to using smartphones that almost the cameras now, whereas, when I first started out, it was almost sort of like, well, you don't shoot vertical, you shoot horizontal when you're on the city streets. And I think that's one of the biggest changes. And of course, I'm sure we'll get into, I think, definitions and what people think of as street photography is ever evolving. And I think there's so many different definitions of street photography around now. So I think, that's what I've seen change mostly over the last 20 years.
Okay, and did you find like because it became more popular, it became more easy to do so on the street because people understand it better, or?
Yeah, I think, 20 years ago, I think it was mostly a lot more of a small group of people doing it than there is now. I think, with the advent of social media, the likes of Instagram, I think maybe people think it's easier to do than other genres of photography.
Oh yeah, but I meant like on the streets, like because the people you photograph maybe are more aware of what you're doing.
Yeah, I think it's, and funnily enough, I always remember Jeff Mermelstein, the American street photographer, saying that he started shooting in the 70s and 80s, and he would say it's so much more difficult to shoot street photography now, simply because people are much more aware of what may happen to a photo. So I think people tend to think, oh, this is going to be making fun of me, it's going to go onto social media. So I think people are a lot more cautious and defensive when they become aware of someone taking photos. So I think in that regard, the subjects have become harder to shoot than maybe they were back in the day. But yeah, it's certainly harder to shoot street photography now.
Okay, yeah, because maybe of course you shoot those funny moments, of course, and so maybe to get it back to you as well, the evolution. Did you notice in those 20 years that you look differently at your subjects? Maybe do composition differently, or?
Yeah, I think we all evolve. I think it's only natural that as we progress, we evolve, become more aware. I shoot certainly less than I used to because I'm more aware of I've shot that before, or I've seen other people shoot that before. So I've certainly shoot less than I used to, and I think
You mean like less in amount of frames, not less in frequency of how much you go outside? Or?
yeah, I guess, yeah, I certainly would say that, I go out maybe more than I used to, but in terms of when I'm out and what I shoot is a lot more selective. When you first start out, everything's new, everything's exciting. You're literally blasting away for hours and hours and hours a day. These days I mostly do, when I do go out, maybe 2 hours is a maximum that I would shoot. And I always say if I come back nowadays with just one photo that's okay, then that's a good result. I mean, 9 times out of 10, we're mostly coming back with, with nothing that we'd actually want to share. So, yeah, so I think I've evolved that way. I think when I first started out as well, I used to use slightly longer lenses than I use now. But I think that's a confidence thing. I think as you grow more confident and know what you want to do, you start getting, I don't want to say braver, but you're certainly open to getting in closer than you may have done.
More comfortable, yeah.
Yeah, and I learned the hard way. I used to argue many years ago. There used to be a Flickr group, and I think it's still going, called Hardcore Street Photography, which is where I think a lot of sort of the high-profile street photographers made their names, came out of that group, and it was very much in that group. You never shot longer than 50mm, which most would say was too long, and I would argue, and I was wrong back then, but that's simply because I started shooting slightly longer, but quickly went down to 35mm, and these days I shoot 28mm. So that's certainly evolved over the years.
Yeah, makes sense. I'm on 40mm now. I came back from 28 actually.
Yeah, oh, it's tough. Yeah. 28 is certainly tough, and yeah, I mean, I shoot with Ricoh GR, so I did go to the 3X, which is a 40mm equivalent, and yeah, it's slightly easier, and I think it depends on where you are. And I saw this once said about Cartier-Bresson shot 50mm in Paris, but the streets there were so much wider. So 50mm was more essential, whereas people in New York, someone like Winogrand, shooting on a 28mm because the streets are so much more crowded. 28mm works there. So yeah, I think it does also depend where you're shooting. Certainly easier if it's busier with a 28mm.
Yeah, to me, it wasn't necessarily for like how wide the streets were, but it was. I enjoyed the 28mm a lot. I used it for like a year. But I felt I went to like architectural with it, very much like one person in like a big scene, and with the 40mm, it's more personal to me.
Yeah. I think I kind of see with a 20mm eye. I'm kind of seeing, so 28mm feels more natural to me, and I like a bit of context to my images. So yeah, 28mm feels more natural to me. 40mm, sometimes I feel that I've lost context. I've got in too close. So it's horses for courses, isn't it? We'll make our own individual choices at the end of the day.
I had the same with the 50mm. That was just too close to me, and so I went to 40.
Yeah, I think we work backwards, don't we, and then find out a sweet spot for how we want to shoot and what appeals to us. So, as I say, there's no right or wrong for anybody. It's what you find and what you're happy with.
Yeah, and did your like experimenting go like natural or organically, or did you really like try like, okay, today I'm gonna try with like an 85mm or black and white or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, when I first started out, I was mostly shooting at 75 sometimes, but I quickly, within a year, had gone to 35. I was on 35 for a number of years, and then eventually, I don't know, mostly 10, 12, 13 years ago, ended up on 28mm, and I've stuck largely to that. And it's about, when I look at a photo, I much prefer it to be wider than longer. So, it's just from reviewing my own work and thinking, yeah, actually, I prefer how this looks. So, as I say, 28mm certainly for the last 12 years predominantly.
Yeah, okay. And so, because a lot of your photos are very short moments, and since you shoot on 28mm, you have to be really close. How do you approach or like, yeah, it's really, you anticipate those moments, or?
Um, yeah, I think sometimes, when you're looking, if you're looking too hard, sometimes you'll miss it, and that must really sound strange. I think sometimes there's luck involved. You'll be in a scene and you feel that something may happen, and you shoot once or twice, and you may not even realize at the time that you got it. It's once you come back, you upload it, you look at it on the computer, and you something, oh, actually, there was something there. Subconsciously, maybe I saw it, but you're not always aware of it. And I always say, street photography, there's at least 40-50% of it is luck sometimes, but you have to put yourself in the position to get that luck. So, yeah, I mean, it's certainly not easy looking for those moments. It's, as I said today in a post that I made, I think on Instagram it was, that, it's taken 20 years to start building a body of work. It's not something that happens overnight. And, I would say maybe per year to get those shots that, are funny or humorous or absurd or whatever you want to call it. I'm only maybe getting 5 of those a year. But then, when you put it into a portfolio, then it starts looking like, yeah, actually you're getting it all the time. So, I'd hate for anyone to think that, when I go out, I'm getting those every day. I'm certainly not.
Yeah, that was something, a lesson for me to have with, like, as you said, like Henri Cartier-Bresson. You look at all his photos and they're all amazing, and you feel like shit, but then you have to think like, yeah, it's done over 50 years. So
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone can shoot a great body of work, within a couple of years. Your enthusiasm there, and you'll shoot a lot of work. But I think when you look back 5-10 years later, you'll start looking at work and think, actually, what I thought was good then is actually mostly only mediocre or okay. So, and
yeah,
that's another thing that I think as you evolve, and I certainly feel it as I've evolved, I've become much more critical of my own work. And I think that is certainly a very important thing in helping you to develop. You can listen to what others say, but I think deep down, if you know what you want to shoot, being self-critical is much really the most important thing you can be as a street photographer, or maybe any photographer.
yeah. And does that still happen for you on like short term? I mean, like, do you look back like 2 or 3 years even, and have that feeling still? Yeah.
Yeah, and alternatively, that I'll look back potentially at photos from 3-4 years ago that I actually didn't think much of, and suddenly I now like. So it works both ways as well. And there's also there's photos that you love, but you get bored of because you see them so often. That other people love that have come across it for the first time, but you're a bit sort of yeah, I'm a bit bored of that photo now.
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna like, because it's related to the next question kind of, but it's first, you do these monthly overviews on your website, which I absolutely love. It's something that I do as well. Was there like something that triggered you to do those, or, and also yearly?
Yeah, I guess those monthly reviews are as much a sort of a visual diary for me. I kind of like to look back at, this is what I was doing, or that's where I was. So that's kind of how it started. And I try and pick my 10, and best is very subjective, isn't it? 10 best photos from a month, and there's me saying that you only get, maybe 5 good photos a year, if you're lucky. So, they are 5 photos I think are okay, 10 photos that I think are okay for that month. The downside of those monthly reviews is sometimes it puts pressure on you to get out and get photos that you can then get into those monthly reviews. So it's an excuse to get out, but sometimes I feel a bit of pressure that I've got to get something so I can then put it at the end of the month into a monthly review. But yeah, I certainly, I mostly flick through them more than anybody else does. So yeah, it's just it's nice to remember where I was or what I was doing at that time. So that was the main sort of motive for doing monthly reviews.
Totally makes sense. Yeah. And so, well, there's a lot of questions going around. First, I'm going to go back to the question I had originally, because you also have this annual archives, which is like the 10 best images of per year. Have you ever like gone back to those? For example, there was one in I wrote it down here somewhere, but I don't see the notes. Oh yeah, in 2012, there was this man with a mouth mask.
Oh, yeah, the
So
London
like,
Zoo
if you
one.
go back,
Yeah.
yeah, and if you like go back to it, like after 2020, it gets a different meaning, of course. So do you sometimes review those photos and feel like this doesn't work anymore, or this is even better now?
Yeah, definitely, and I quite often say, and I think I said it when I posted my 2025 annual archive, that another day I most would have picked maybe 3 or 4 different photos, and in fact on the day I was going to post my 2025 archive, I actually made 3 changes from what was already there. So yeah, I mean, I think day, mood, all will influence, but I try and once it's up, once it's out in the public, I'll leave it as it is.
Mm.
Whether I will look back at some photos, think I regret including that. And then if I'm going through my archives and I see another photo, I think, that would have been better for that year. But I keep it as honest as I can once it's out there in public.
Okay, that's cool. Um, and then another question was like that popped up now because you mentioned it. Is like, do you feel like the pressure to publish on your website, Instagram? I also know you participate in a few contests. Is it like something you feel you need to do, or something you?
Uh, I think, yeah, I think there's, I mean, maybe it's one of the downsides of Instagram is that you feel like you have to post regularly.
Yeah.
I think I put on my story today that one of my aims for 2025 is to post less, but post
Same.
better. Yeah. So yeah, I think there's, whenever you're trying to put something out, there is a pressure, and it's like I say with the monthly ones. I mean, I find sort of January, February, certainly in the UK, and certainly where I live now in Western-super-Mare, it's so quiet. There's very little happening, that it's that pressure to try and find something does actually get quite difficult. So yeah, there's certainly pressure. It's pressure I'm putting on myself because no one else is expecting it. But yeah, but again, pressure drives us, doesn't it? It makes us get out. It makes us look for things. But the danger there is that sometimes you can push it. You're trying to create photos that actually aren't worth pushing. I'd rather something naturally happen rather than me trying to be all clever and sort of in my head I'm thinking of something when I take the shot, and when anyone else looks at it they haven't got a clue what was going through my head. So I think there's a danger that can happen when that pressure's on you to get shots. So yeah, it's certainly there all the time.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. It's recognizable as well. So that's why I was asking, because I saw the monthly post, which is something I do as well, and sometimes I have nothing to say this month, or yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's some months where I didn't even manage to. I think there's some months where I've only done 5 images, or it may be in the annual archives where I've only put 5 images up or 7 images up because yes, I have enough photos to fill it out, but I'm not going to put really weak or poor stuff up there because that what's the point of that? So, but yeah, I try with the monthly ones to at least get 10 that I think are okay to go on the website.
Yeah. That's yeah, cool. And then well, you're a wedding photographer next to the street photography thing. And I saw on your website you wrote this thing, I see wedding photography as more than just pictures. It's a way of preserving your day for future generations. The images I capture aren't just for you, they'll become a part of your family's history, precious and priceless family heirlooms. And I was wondering, of course, it's not a family picture then, but do you look at your street photography for the world and as the same, or?
100%. I think when I do street photography, and I've often thought about is why do I do it? What do I enjoy most about it? And I think number one is just being out there. I find, the hunt is the enjoyable thing. What happens afterwards, once you put a photo out there and the feedback you get is kind of doesn't matter as much. But then you're leaving something behind. I think, street photos, documentary photos become ever more important with the passing of time. So there's definitely a social history aspect to it. But also like the idea that, once I'm no longer around, I kind of am, because my body of work will still be there, whatever happens to it. So yeah, and I don't think that's any different from the wedding photo side of things. It's for families, future generations to look back at, photos, and they become ever more interesting with the passing of time.
Yeah, I can agree. Yeah. And so have you found that your street photography has it influenced your wedding photography, or vice versa, maybe?
Oh, it's with shadow of a doubt. My wedding photography has been hugely influenced by street photography, and in fact, um, I mean, I don't do weddings as much as I do since 2020, and the pandemic came along, so I kind of cut back after that, and only do one or two weddings now. It's not something I actively push, but I mean, the last wedding I did as a street photographer. There was no posing, no portrait. So, street photography has literally taken over my wedding photography. So I tend to get couples that have got no interest in all the cliche, cheesy, pose stuff. So, yeah, in effect, I'm a street photographer at a wedding. I'm not a wedding photographer. I'm a street photographer shooting a wedding. And that's the kind of clients that I attract through that. They don't want, and I find it tends to be older couples or couples having their second marriage. They don't want all the fuss, and they just want to get on and enjoy the day and know there's someone in the background, taking those photos, and they want, and I say on my weddings, it's warts and all, I'm not going to, if there's a child throwing a tantrum, I'm going to photograph that. Whereas I think when you're doing weddings more traditionally, you try and focus on the pretty pictures and the romantic pictures, and now I think I say warts, wonder and all. So so that is simply because of my street photography.
Yeah, and I think in a way that's also funny, because like on family gatherings in general, but especially on weddings, the drunk uncle is also a big part of it, and it's fun then that you would photograph it. Yeah.
I always say, I mean, a weddings is a 30-minute service for then a big party afterwards. So, so yeah, so the best photos are either in the evening when everyone's had a drink, because everyone lets their hair down, they forget about the camera. And in fact, they start playing up to the camera, which also I don't like so much, because I don't want it to appear that I'm there or directing anything. But it's I've never really known any couple in the history of all the wedding photos or weddings that I've done have ever liked a group shot or a portrait shot most. It's always the funny moment. It's always the amusing moment that becomes a favourite photo. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the group shot is just for like in the book for like, yeah, those people were there, but then you have to see this, and there's a story behind this. Yeah.
Yeah. And I say to couples now, every other guest at that wedding has a smartphone and will be getting all those sort of group photos and portraits. Let them get that, and let me just concentrate on doing, my street photography at a wedding. And that's what I do nowadays. So, yeah.
Yeah, I totally get. Yeah, for me, I only do corporate events. I'm gonna do one wedding this year, and it's for my sister, so I'm slightly happy that I'm allowed to photograph, because I know just like I can't sit down for 30 minutes during the ceremony. So I might as well just walk around and take photos.
Yeah,
So
I mean, the idea of me going to a wedding as a guest now fills me with dread, because once, I think I've mostly shot about, I don't know, 50, 75 weddings or so over the years, and I know what's coming, and so the idea of sitting there as a guest thinking, yeah, I know what's coming next, I think would bore me to tears as a guest. So, yeah. But you'll mostly find after you've done that wedding, you'll want to do lots. So that's what happened. My first wedding was my cousin's, so it grew out of that.
Yeah, it's not my first, so I'm sure it's not gonna be my last either, because there's still family that might get married. But yeah, it's not my first. But it's always only never in the church. It's always like the, how do you call it, in like the municipality thingy. So I was also curious because for a one-time thing, I think maybe it happens in 2018. You did like a full day or trip for just analog pictures. I'm forgetting where it was. It was all analog. I'm gonna have a look. Costa Blanca on film. Yeah. So, like, was there an idea behind why you wanted to do film again, or was it just you felt like it?
No, I mean, obviously, I'm old enough to have started on film. I got my first SLR when I was a teenager back in the mid to late 80s. So I shot film. Um, I When digital came along, it changed everything for me. I always found I was impatient. I never got into developing film. That was one of the things I never got into. So whenever my photos were coming back on film being developed, I was never quite happy. I was always frustrated. So digital came along and that sort of changed everything for me. But I've kept hold of a lot of my old film cameras, and I was heading off to Spain, and I just thought, oh, I'll take a film camera with me just to freshen it up, have a change, and see what I come back with. And yeah, so I was there for about a week. I was shooting digital predominantly, but there was a few times I went out with a little Olympus XA4 and shot. And yeah, I was quite pleased actually with what I got. But yeah, I'm a digital photographer these days, so film's a luxury, and especially with the cost of it nowadays, isn't something that I contemplate ever doing too much.
No, yeah, I can. For me as well, I've I had to do analog in school, and I hated developing negatives because it was too stressful to me. Like if you ruin it, it's yeah.
I think there's an argument there that film does have, or analog, if you want to put it that way, has a better aesthetic. It looks better. The fact that a lot of people will take digital photos and then try and make it look like it was shot on film, sort of suggests that. So I think there is that. But again, I wonder, is that through the fact that we tend to like photos that are a bit nostalgic? We look back at 20, 30 years ago. It's maybe part of that. But yeah, I think, that was part of it, just to get a different aesthetic when I went out on that trip to Spain, just to see what it looked like.
Yeah.
That almost sounds like Gary Winogrand, doesn't it? I photographed to see how things look photographed, yeah, which wasn't intentional.
I was just looking at the camera because it's a similar setup as your Ricoh, I think. No.
I like,
Sorry.
yeah, I like small pocket cameras. I'm very much into, and at times I call myself a snapshot street photographer. So I'm not overly technical. I chase moments. I always say that as photographers, there's you're either looking at moments, you're looking at light, or you're looking at composition. And if you get all three, then you've got the photo there. But in list of order, what I'm looking for first and foremost is a moment. We're talking about those amusing, ironic type photos. So, technically, it's less important for me. So, and with the Ricoh, I have, 3 custom settings that I'll just generally quickly switch between, but I don't like to think too much about settings when I'm out. So yeah, I like small cameras that I can pocket. They're discreet. Yeah. And as you say, the XA4 is similar in size to a Ricoh GR. So yeah, that's why I use it. I mean, of course, I've used SLRs and DSLRs over the years, but yeah, no, these days I prefer something much smaller and discreet. Certainly for street weddings, I still use a DSLR.
Okay. Yeah, it makes sense, of course. I use I have a Nikon Z8 that I never use on street because it's too big, and then I have a Nikon Z7 who is a bit smaller, but yeah, still too big to my taste. But yeah. Um, and so I was wondering why you got attracted to these funny moments mostly rather than the aesthetic, nice Instagram shots or something.
um, yeah, I think again that's one of those evolvements. I think when I first started out, I most probably was drawn more to the sort of more compositional aesthetic. I mean, when I say I've shot 20 years, that means I've shot colour street photography for 20 years. I was most probably for 2 years before that, so maybe that's where you're thinking the 22 years was shooting black and white, inspired by Cartier-Bresson. But yeah, I stumbled around that time. I stumbled across three people that sort of turned me to humour, and that would have been the work of Tony Ray Jones. And then, of course, you've got the late great Martin Parr, and the humour and irony that he had in his photos, and Joel Mayovitz as well. And it just, I thought, this is actually what I want. I want something a bit more raw. Less pretty. I want it to feel how I see the world rather than some idealistic, stylistic view of the world, which I'm not saying is wrong. It's just that's not something that appeals to me necessarily. So yeah, I like humour. I tend to rely on humour myself. So and I think there's a bit of a British tradition in terms of street photography of humour. So you look at the people, Matt Stewart, Dave Solomons, Paul Russell, those kind of guys. It's all a lot of humour and absurdity in their photos. And I spoke about the hardcore street photography group, and that's where I would have first encountered those guys. So that influence would have been there as well. So yeah, it's part of what appeals to me, as well as I think there's a bit of a British tradition for humour.
Yeah, I mean, you have a big history of humor, I think, in all types of media. So,
in fact, someone once, I don't know if you're familiar with the Carry On films of the sort of late 60s, early 70s. They were very cheesy, very cheesy comedy driven British films, and someone once referred to my photography as like a carry-on film. So you'll have to look one of those up at some time.
Yeah, I'll have to look
they're
those
very
up.
cheesy and mostly not appropriate these days.
Because I wouldn't say your photos are cheesy, so that's kind of a weird.
Yeah, I think it's because of that humour. Yeah.
Yeah, you're answering very efficiently. It's funny to have that.
Because I talk about it all the time. Guys that I go out will tell you that I'll waffle and talk about street photos. We'll do more talking than we'll actually do photos when I'm out with other, photographers. And they're actually laughing. Listen, if we say this because, we go off on all kinds of tangents. So, if there's one thing I love, more than street photography or slightly less than doing street photography, it's talking street photography. So, we could mostly sit here for 2 days and talk about it, to be honest, Fred.
I have the time. It's short. No, and that's actually a very interesting thing because it's to me, it's like, it's the first time, the previous episode, which was recorded 2 days ago, but it's the first time I heard someone say like, I like going out with other people for street photography, because most people are like, I do street photography alone and I like going out with people, but I don't do street photography then.
I completely agree with that. I can't shoot street photography when I'm with other people. So when I meet up with other people, it's to talk street photography. We'll try and shoot it. But we'll both normally come away and say, no, I didn't shoot a single thing today. And in fact, a couple of the guys that I've met up with, we've said next time we meet up, we're going to have a coffee, then go our separate ways for a couple of hours, and then come back and see what was shot, because that's, we just can't. I can't shoot when I'm, with other people. I'm just talking all the time. It's you have to be in the zone. And street photography, again, being out shooting street photography is for me to switch off from, everyday life, even though I'm shooting everyday life, which is a bit of a some sort of irony in that. But it's a way I can relax, and I need to be in the zone to see things, which mostly comes back to that earlier question about how do I see those moments. I don't see those moments when I'm out with other people. I need to be in the zone. And some days, if you're not mentally in the zone, and I went to London the weekend before this, and I struggled seeing anything, and you think, oh, I'm rubbish, I'm useless, but you have to be in the right mindset as well. I mean, it was damn cold, to be fair, but yeah, but yeah, I prefer to shoot street photography alone, but I also like to chat street photography, so meet up with a couple of other street photographers now and again.
Totally makes sense. And is it like in Brighton then nearby? Because I'm not sure if there's a lot of street photographers in your.
Yeah, so Bristol, not Brighton.
Sorry.
Yeah. Although I did when I was in London, used to go down to Brighton a lot. But yeah, no, it's there's one guy, Royce, who I will generally meet in Bristol, and there's another guy who lives way up north but comes down because he's got family connections down this way, and he'll actually come to Western-super-Mare where I am. So yeah, so it's in one of those two places. And the other person I tend to isn't a street photographer at all. It's actually my brother who loves watching me shoot. So we'll often go out walking, talking, talking mostly being the main thing. But yeah, so
Yeah. That's funny. So he's watching you watching people.
he loves it. Yeah, he loves street photography, and he loves my street photography. But of course, he has to say that, doesn't he? But yeah, he's not a street photographer himself at all. But he enjoys it. He enjoys getting out and walking, and generally I meet up with him in London, so it's walking around London, which he likes as well. So yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, and he's the biggest supporter of my photography, to be fair to him. So I need to give him a shout out. So yeah, thanks,
that's good
Dom.
to have.
Yeah.
That's very kind. And so yeah, and we kind of touched on it as already a bit. So on your website as well, you say like street photography for me is about being in the scene. I'm gonna paraphrase just a bit, and not working outside, peeking in, because you're a participant. So how do you? Because at the same time, it's not very conscious that you do these things. And of course, if you're with a group, it's harder to do these things.
Yeah, and I think, when I say that, I'm talking about sort of focal lengths that I'm using. And yeah, and again, it's not for me to tell other people how to shoot street photography or what street photography is. These are the rules that I impose on myself. I'm not saying anybody else, should shoot it this way, should shoot it that way. I did a lot of that years ago, and it doesn't make you overly popular when people will call you a gatekeeper or whatever. So I will say, this is what street photography is to me, this is how I shoot street photography. Whether the way you shoot street photography is something I don't actually think street photography, well, I just don't follow you, I just don't look at the work. So but I'm not going to tell you shouldn't be doing it that way. So but yeah, I mean, that's when I talk about you need to be inside the scene, I'm talking about you sort of using shorter, wider length lenses, where you've got to be in the scene. If you're standing outside with a longer lens, I think, it's easy, isn't it, to stand, 100 feet away with a long lens and take pictures of people. I think street photography has to be a challenge. And I always say this, if it feels easy, you're most probably not taking a street photo. If you're coming back and you've taken what you think are 10 great photos in a day, it's most probably not very good street photography. So, for me, it has to be a challenge. I have to feel like it's difficult to get. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm talking about when I talk about, you've got to be in the scene. You've got to be a participant walking through it. Yeah.
I find it interesting that you have like these, you call it rules, imposed on yourself. Do you find it necessary to be more creative as well, or?
Yeah, well, there's a difficult question, is it? I mean, what is creativity? Am I trying to be creative? I don't know if I'm trying to be creative. I'm trying to find moments that amuse me. That I find absurd. Whether that's creative or not, I think is for the audience to decide. For the person looking at the image, is this creative? That's not what I'm thinking about when I go out. It's ultimately, I'm looking to get photos that appeal to me, that please me, and again, that's come with time. That's come with evolving. I think, again, when you first start out, you're looking to please others. You're looking to get that kind of feedback. I think when you've been doing it long enough, you just want to please yourself, and that's all you can control. As I said earlier, if you put once you put the photo out there, it's not yours. What people think of it, what they say about it. Well, you've got no control over it. So all I can control is what I do when I go out, and what I select to put out. And then once it's out there, then it's out there.
Yeah, it's kind of weird that you say this because I'm reading these. It's like the journals of Keith Haring. So it's just like his diary, and he said like the exact same thing. Like I read today in the chapter I was reading today, exactly like you create art for yourself as an artist, and what other people do with it is totally up to them.
Yeah, and
So
I
it's
think the moment you're starting to try to please others or shooting what you think others want, then you're not being true to yourself. And as artists, and I use that term lightly, or loosely, I think you have to be true to yourself. It's about truth. And I think once you start to create work to get, this will get a lot of likes on social media, then you're not being true to yourself. So I'd rather put something out that I really like, and whether it gets 1 like or 2 likes, so be it,
Yeah, I'm switching to that mindset. Yeah, because I've always had it, but I'm consciously making a decision to not let Instagram have any power anymore.
It's easier said than done. I will say it all the time, and then I think, I get frustrated if something doesn't get enough likes, and then I have to remind myself it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter in the scale. How many likes is enough? 100 likes, 1,000 likes. It doesn't change anything at the end of the day.
No, and you always benchmark it to previous likes, but then the algorithm changes, so it's yeah.
And again, it's a cliche. You're only as good as your next photo. So,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But so then if I understand you correctly, you're not really considering yourself as an artist, or?
I had this conversation once with someone, and I don't consider myself an artist, but what I put out may be considered art, if that makes sense. And I'm not trying to create art, but street photography, you don't make money from it. You're not going to be, you're certainly not going to make a living from it. You're most probably not going to become famous through it. So, in that sense, it is an art form. It is, you're creating art. You're creating something to either go in a book or go on a wall. So, but whether I consider myself an artist, because I'm not trying to create art, which seems kind of hypocritical in a way, that I'm saying it's art, but I'm not an artist. But I'm a guy that goes out and shoots street photography. If it becomes art afterwards, then so be it. But yeah, maybe I am. Who knows? It's again for others to judge, isn't it? It's very subjective. Yeah. What's art? It's a difficult.
And was an artist, yeah. I think we could do an entire episode or multiple episodes on that question alone, maybe. But it was because you mentioned it. I was like, okay, that's an interesting thing to pick in on, because it's yeah. Most people consider themselves an artist, I think.
Yeah, I get that. I've got friends who will say photography is not art, because all you're doing is pushing a button. It's mechanical. It's not painting. It's not painting the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. It's. So I think there's 2 ways of looking at it. But I think street photography, the final. I don't want to use the word product, but the final picture when it's out there is art. Because it's going on a wall, it's going in a book, and it will mostly be there 20, 30, 40, 50 years later if it's good enough. But yeah, so yeah, I stand to be corrected on.
And do you feel then your photography is personal, or?
Yeah, it's personal. It's a personal thing. Again, like I say, it's when I'm shooting street photography, I'm out on my own. It's a way of switching off. It's a way of relaxing. So it's very personal. And again, I like humor. So what I'm shooting is personal to me. And it has to resonate with me. So yeah, it's a very personal thing. And again, it's one of those cliches, isn't it? There's two people in a photo. It's the subject and the photographer. And yeah, I think that, 'cause we all see the world differently. Me and you could go out on the streets tomorrow, both come back with two different views of the same scene, and that's personal, isn't it? So we're both putting ourselves in that photo as well, in some shape or form. So yeah, it's a very personal thing.
Yeah. And so I wonder, because a lot of your photos are, well, as you said, you're like in the scene and not just observing it, but there's also like here and there some photos that are. I remember there's one of a guy showing his butt to a lady and her dog.
Yeah.
Do you ever get in? I can totally imagine this guy either laughing it off or getting very angry.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't usually give too much away about what led up to a photo, but in terms of that one, I came down and he was sat at the table opposite the lady that's in the picture, and she was trying to take a picture of him on her camera phone, and he started sticking up two fingers, clearly didn't want his photo being taken by her. I got a couple of shots of that. He suddenly looked up, saw me, and I don't know if it was to kind of show off to me, but he just suddenly stood up, pulled his trousers down, and bared his backside at her. And what I kind of like about that photo is just the way the dog is looking, straight at his backside, thinking, "What on earth's going on here?" So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I rarely get into any sort of confrontation. I've got a funny story about one confrontation that happened a number of years ago. I was out, funnily enough, with another guy who had just started street photography and asked if he could come out with me. And we were in London, Oxford Circus Station, and there was this helium balloon of a unicorn tied to the railings, and it was quite a windy day, and as people were coming up the steps out of Oxford Circus tube station, this balloon was blowing in faces. You were getting all these funny expressions. So I rarely stake out a scene, but I stood there for about 5-10 minutes taking a number of photos. Suddenly I got tapped on the shoulder, and some woman said, "Well, what are you doing?" And I explained what I was doing. She said, "Well, if you've got a photo of me," and I said, "Well, to be fair, I've taken quite a lot of photos. Can't really go through. I don't know if I've got you in the background or whatever." She started getting very aggressive. "I want you to delete any photos of me straight away, immediately." And I said, "Well, I will decide what I delete, and I won't look at any of these photos until I get home tonight." And that wasn't good enough for her. She said, "I'm going to get the police." She ran off to the underground station. She came back about 2 minutes later and said, "You got to wait there. The police are on their way." And then she walked off. And the guy I was with was saying, "Oh, come on, let's go." And I said, No, I've done nothing wrong. I'll wait for the police." Of course, the police never emerged. But funny thing is, when I got home that night and went through all the photos, she wasn't in a single one. So, and I always remember Nick Turpin, street photographer, put a video up once, and he was talking about when people start asking him questions, and he said all he does is give someone a card and says, "Check my website later. I don't have time to talk about it now. If there's something you don't like, I'll take it down." So that's what I do now. If anyone ever sort of questions what I've done, I'll just give them a card. And yeah, I never ever hear from anybody. But yeah, and I tend to find it's not the subjects that, it's someone that's maybe looking on from the side, that seems to take exception that you're taking photos of other people. So
yeah, I've heard it from others as well. It's funny that happens.
I had it a couple of years ago in Weston-super-Mare, where I live now. And I was on the main high street taking some pictures, and they weren't particularly good or anything. And suddenly this old lady came over to me and said, "What are you doing taking pictures?" So I tried to explain to her what street photography is, and she just shook her head and said, "Oh, you're weird," and walked off. So,
I mean, she's not wrong entirely. So
no, she's not. And I've sometimes thought I may put that up as a quote on my website. "You're weird."
Yeah. Well, if not you personally, of course, it's just like street photography in a way is kind of,
People that don't get it or don't understand it, and I get this a lot, people. In fact, someone just for Christmas, he's a landscape photographer, and he was saying, "It's taken me years to understand street photography. I just didn't get it." And I think, most people who like street photography are other street photographers, aren't they? Or maybe other. It's most members of the public don't even understand what it is.
No, I showed my parents last month, and
Yeah, it's one of those things. Once you get it, you get it. But I could be controversial here and say, some street photographers don't understand what street photography is, but I've promised not to be controversial, so I won't say that.
you can if you want. That's totally fine. No, yeah, like I mentioned my parents, and I showed like some pictures to them, and they were like, "Is this legal?" Like, yeah,
Yeah,
it's totally fine.
it's yeah. I mean, I'm guessing it's legal in the Netherlands, is it? You don't have
I'm in Belgium, but yeah,
issues.
it's
Are you
illegal
in
in
Belgium?
both.
Sorry, I
Yeah,
thought you were in Netherlands.
yeah.
Okay, you're in Belgium.
No,
Yeah,
no, no.
yeah.
So it's yeah. I mean, there's like some limitations, but it's mostly it's fine.
Yeah, I was going to say in Spain, I didn't realize you actually should be asking permission.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I only found out after someone challenged me once when I was in Spain. I looked it up, and actually, yeah, you are meant to ask for permission in Spain, but in 10, 12 years of shooting in Spain, I've only had one time when someone said, "Should I be doing that, and should I be asking his permission?" So
Hmm. It's a tough one to ask permission in advance. Then yeah.
I wouldn't do it. Yeah, it's to me, that's I'm candid. The moment you ask someone, the,
Yeah, it's
everything
gone.
changes. It's not candid, is it? Even
No.
once they become aware of the camera, so it's trying to get that photo, and if you're asking for permission, to me, then you're not doing street photography, which is going to be
Yeah, I asked permission last summer once because there was no way I could get it without him knowing. Because it was this guy. It was in Amsterdam. He was shaving his beard inside his like there's like a big cubicle mirror, and he was shaving himself. And like it's on a big square, so there's nowhere to go without him seeing it because he's seeing all around him in the mirror. So I just asked like, could I snap a picture? It was like, first he asked me why, I just explained it was funny, and I took the picture, and
it looked
yeah.
the same afterwards. So from when you first saw it, when he wasn't aware,
Yeah,
actually go, okay, that
because he was just like shaving himself, and I just asked like, do you mind me taking pictures? Like, yeah, sure, and he just continued, and yeah.
There's one photo on my website. I think it was 2022, maybe February 22, if I'm not mistaken. It's two girls on the beach, and they're beneath the pier in Weston-super-Mare, and it says "Sky beneath us." And I did, before I took those photos, ask, "Do you mind me taking?" Because I was conscious they were young girls. I'm a man of a certain age, and I didn't want to appear slightly, there was no one else on the beach. It was those two and me. So that was one occasion, but they were just doing their own thing. I think they were
Right.
filming something for their own social media, so they quickly forgot I was there. But yeah, that's the only time I've done it, I think. But yeah, I may go up to someone afterwards when they've noticed and just explain. But yeah, 99% of the time people don't see me or I don't get asked, and I certainly don't ask.
Yeah. Same for me, but yeah, with the guy shaving himself, there was no way for me to.
Yeah, and I get,
get around it.
I get some people think, that, morally that may be wrong, or it's, they don't think it's ethical to be taking pictures without asking permission. But, I will always say to that, as long as something is legal, I'm not doing anything illegal. I can't judge what someone else's morals or ethics are. I can only go by, what I personally believe and if it's legal. So, I've never harmed anyone with a photo. So,
No, exactly. I also think it's you're not. Yeah, we have this Dutch saying. You're not putting them in a bad light. Usually, it's.
Yeah, I got, some people do think that I'm mocking. I'm not intentionally mocking. Maybe what I find amusing may be questionable to some people. I mean, I've got one or two photos that I've been very troubled about showing, because I thought, is this actually mocking? So I've withheld those. I've never put those out there, but I'm not intentionally mocking, but sometimes my humor may be cut to the chase a bit, sometimes close to the bone. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's always personal, I think. Yeah, and for people who don't get the humor, if they don't get the humor, they won't understand the photo anyway.
No, exactly. And you can only make your own judgments, can't you, based on who you are and what you want to do. So I understand it, but I'll make my own decisions.
No, very true. And I think on that note, we'll start wrapping up, because otherwise we will be here for 2 days maybe.
Definitely.
It's getting late for me. Well, it's 9 a.m. but 5 p.m. But so thank you, Darren, for your time and insights. If anyone wants to follow Darren, of course, I'm putting his links in the description to his website, which you should check out. There's some amazing overviews and some great blog posts. Also to his Instagram, of course. And if you like the podcast, make sure to follow it on your favorite platform. And feel free to share it with a friend who might enjoy this episode as well. So thank you, Darren.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Totally enjoyed it. And yeah, if I'm ever in your neck of the woods, let's meet up. And I'd say shoot street photography. We most really wouldn't. We'd mostly chat for a while, wouldn't we? And not shoot anything.
I mean, both are fun.